So, Visions of Mana is an upcoming action role-playing game developed by Oka Studios and published by Square Enix. And even though I'm a big JRPG fan, there are a lot of smaller series that I have yet to get into. It just so happens that the Mana series is one that I have never played, even though it's heavily related to one of my favorite JRPG series of all time. Now, I've always heard of the Mana games, but I never really gave them a fair shot, especially considering the vast amount of JRPG franchises that are already out there. After having the chance to play the demo with its already vast RPG mechanics and heavy emphasis on real-time action, I have to say I really enjoyed my time with it so far. Just remember that this is coming from someone with no experience with the Mana games at all, and I'm strictly going off of my time with the demo and nothing else. So today I'm going to go over my experience with it so far and everything that Visions of Mana has to offer. If you are new to the channel, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe for anything JRPG related. Also comment below if Visions of Mana is something that you are looking forward to. So if you're not familiar with the Visions of Mana series, it originally started off as a Final Fantasy spin-off named Final Fantasy Adventure, or some other people may know it by as Mystic Quest back in 1991. However, the Final Fantasy elements were then scrapped following the second installment so that it could become its own series away from Final Fantasy. Since then, the series has produced 4 mainline entries, with Visions of Mana being the next mainline release. Although Visions actually breaks the trend of numbered entries. So to explain that a little, even though the games aren't numbered in the title, in Japanese gaming culture, fans tend to want to make clear distinctions between mainline titles. In the West, people tend to get scared off when they see large numbers next to a new game, with newcomers shying away from the franchise thinking that they need to have played all the other previous games in the series in order to understand what's going on. Visions of Mana, even though it's technically the next big mainline game in the series, is not considered the 5th game, and it drops the numbers completely. Dawn of Mana was actually the last mainline entry in the series, dating back to 2006, which is absolutely wild to me. But after having experienced the demo and a taste of a Mana game, I have to say I was really impressed with a multitude of different things here. One of those being the drop-dead gorgeous art style and presentation. If it's one thing that I will always stress when it comes to first impressions of any game, it would most definitely have to be the art style. Stylized graphics that we see here, and really in a lot of JRPGs now, I've always found it a visually appealing art style to go for. I find myself gravitating towards that more than I do with a game that strives for realism. For instance, take games like Tales of Arise that have a pretty interesting take on stylized graphics. They give the environment and the world around you an almost realistic feel to it, but it's just subtle enough to where it doesn't feel too realistic, if that makes sense. It's your typical stylized high-fidelity graphics that a bunch of other anime-style JRPGs use. Games like Genshin Impact, Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, and Xenoblade are all similar in that sense. Visions of Mana almost gives me the same vibe, to where the art style just does so much for the game. It's a type of charm that I just think realistic art styles just cannot capture in the same way. To where you can look at a random screenshot of a game and instantly know, like, oh yeah, that is this game. Obviously, all of that's really gonna come down to preference, and I totally understand that. It's the presentation in this game and the art style that accompanies it when it comes to the environments and the character designs that are just so eye-catching. All in all, it's just a very breathtaking art style to see, and one that I always appreciate. Now, when it comes to the combat here, I've seen a lot of talk around it being slow and sluggish, which is totally fair given how different it is to the speed that comes from other action games from Square Enix. It's certainly no Tales of Arise, Final Fantasy 16, or Grand Blue Fantasy, and it's definitely no Kingdom Hearts. But from the small portion I did play, I still found the combat to be very enjoyable. It does take some getting used to, and as a huge action RPG fan myself, I definitely noticed that while slow, the combat has a lot going for it. The RPG mechanics are very deep from what I played, and naturally, I imagine it'll only get even more complex as you move forward. Having to micromanage each of your characters and build them up in different ways is very flexible, as you'll have these class-based items called elemental elemental vessels that pretty much change the job that character has, and gives them a unique ability to use in battle depending on the elemental vessel equipped. And this system is so awesome to see in this game because with every elemental vessel comes a skill tree, and for every ability unlocked on that skill tree, you can use that ability on whatever other elemental vessel you want. It's not a new system in RPGs, but it's a system that really emphasizes the freedom to play how you want to play, while also providing that complexity that a lot of the best JRPGs on the market have always had. Being able to switch party members and how they play is also very well done. It's very similar to Final Fantasy VII Remake in the way you could switch characters and issue commands. The systems work very much like it does in Remake, which in my opinion is the perfect blend of turn-based mixed with action that many games have not been able to replicate just as well. So to see those similarities in Visions of Mana really has me looking forward to see just how deep the combat and the systems around it will go as you progress through the game. As I said before, the party is super flexible in the way that you could customize them. When it comes to AI, you can have them be as aggressive or as passive as you want them to be. For an action RPG game like this, having these settings are extremely important to have, especially when AI can just cause unnecessary problems depending on the situation. You definitely don't want the AI to be running in and getting killed, just messing up the flow of combat. But what I was trying to do, and I'm sure many others, was actually trying to pull off some really cool combos while mixing in the RPG elements like elemental weaknesses. As I said earlier, while the game does feel pretty slow in comparison to a lot of other action RPGs, the tech you can pull off here has a lot of potential. Depending on the character you play as can also determine how easy or hard it can be to pull off some crazy combos that I myself was trying out. You can also double jump and dodge in the air, which can also open up a lot of possibilities in the gameplay. And considering that the director of the game had no problem showing off their skills in the combat, I have a feeling that the combo fanatics like myself are in for a good time. As far as the exploration is concerned, and considering this is a demo, I thought it was pretty standard. You do get a mount to ride on as you explore around, which I honestly really appreciated. But I actually found myself at times just taking in the scenery and walking around a lot because the presentation is really that good. I would imagine it's an early area of the game that's there to get you familiar with the mechanics and enemies and how combat works. You do have your classic chests around crevices and high atop mountains, and for some, that's really all you need for exploration. There are some side quests you'll find scattered around as you explore around, but nothing really special in that regard, as most of them are just your typical JRPG side quests. You can find mana crystals around the world which restore MP to your party, and I did find a stone that you can interact with, but you can't get to it in the demo. But with the dialogue from the characters, it does sound like it's a unique trial activity that'll be available as you progress further into the game. Beyond that, how deep the exploration will really go will have to be seen when the game eventually releases. Now, I don't really have much to say about the story itself, and I think that's completely understandable. I mean, it's a fairly short demo that really isn't focused too much on getting you attached to the characters, but you do get a pretty good understanding of the role they play in the party and a little bit about their personalities. From what I gather so far, it's your typical JRPG story. I think the characters will do a really good job of getting the players invested as they go along and really be the shining point of the game. And at the end of it all, I think it'll culminate into a really charming story. As a big story person myself, that'll be one aspect that I will be watching very closely as I progress through Visions of Mana. Overall, I wasn't expecting that I would ever play a Mana game, much less enjoy a small portion of what's to come. But I thoroughly enjoyed what I played here. It's definitely one of the more beautiful games I've played this year next to Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. Alongside Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, this will be the next big release that Square Enix has to offer this year. So tell me what you think. Is Visions of Mana a game that you will be getting at release? And if you got the chance to play the demo, tell me your thoughts down below. One thing I can confidently say for sure is that I am all in for Visions of Mana.